Welcome back to Jack's Coffee Break. My name is Jack, and this is my coffee break. Today we are continuing our habitat tutorial series. So this is going to be part 5, and hopefully this will be the last part that we actually end up focusing on this habitat. Oh, we have a baby. Hello, small baby. The ADHD is going to be real today, guys. I'm sorry. So, in the last 4 pieces, we started with figuring out what kind of shape that we're going to go for over our habitat. You know, we broke out of the box and we created something that looked a little bit like this. We designated where we want these different areas, and then we spent the next couple of tutorials fleshing out this area and making the habitat look, honestly, really cool. I am in love with this habitat. It's I don't know, I like it. I just like it. Unfortunately, for all the amazing stuff that we have going on through here, we have some difficulties with some stuff going on through here. And you'll notice that there are a couple of changes. For example, this whole area is suddenly undecorated. There's an education board, there's these little statues here, and we will go over that in a second. But what I want to focus on today is taking these areas that we've already established in episode 2 and just focus on elevating them, making them look good and like they fit within this space that we've designed for ourselves. Because previously they didn't. You know, we had a bamboo wall along here, and the African wild dogs really didn't like that. We had some nice little flowers through here, but of course they didn't really fit with the biome that we're sort of working in through here. There was just a lot of little things that I think could be touched up. And then of course, you know, with our habitat so highly decorated, it's really making our building look low res, you know. We're really lacking in a lot of detail, and I want to punch this up as well. So we are going to be focusing on those things today. So returning to this space and the fact that things have been moved, I've attempted recording this already once, and during that recording I started going through and removing the things that I knew that I didn't want. And so now we have this sort of cleaned up space. So this is just the path, this is just the habitat border, and then we started talking about making little custom enrichment or custom education boards. So we don't have power through here, so let's go ahead and fix that. If you are in sandbox mode, you'll have this little sandbox tool. You can come down to economy settings, and you can click this power everything button. But if you are in franchise mode, then one of the other ways that we can deal with this is to come up to our guest-facing or our staff-facing facilities, and we can just add a power source, you know, wherever it feels appropriate. So right now, let's go ahead and add a solar panel. Let's add it right here, and let's double check that it's actually powering everything. It is not, so we're gonna need something a little bit bigger. Let's get a regular transformer, I think. That way we know that everything is covered. There we go. So, and of course this is temporary. We can always move this somewhere else. We can add it to the building if we wanted to. This is just for the moment, just so that way we can start working on this space. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to rethink about this area and what we want to add polish to. So I think the first thing that I want to do, let's go ahead and move this away. We will talk about education in a little bit. I think that the first thing I want to do is work on the foliage that's happening through here. So again, we don't necessarily want these borders to be really well shown off, and we want to sort of hide this space. So one of the things that we're going to do for that, so we're going to go into our African wild dogs, and when you come into here, you can click on these little icons, and it will automatically select these, which I absolutely love. You can also do the same thing if you go into enrichment. It will sort the habitat items by species, so you don't have to deal with like going through the filter and going through like literally over 100 animals worth of content. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to come through and we're going to find something that sort of fits what the bamboo was doing previously. So another one of our like really good staple items is going to be this grass. So this is this is common reeds. Another one that we have in here is elephant grass, and it's going to look like this. So here's the elephant grass, and here are our reeds. So basically the same kind of object, just 2 different styles. These 2 are really cool for a lot of things, these 2 specific plants, that's why I'm highlighting them. They count as opaque, and their hitbox is solid. And that means that you can actually use these as barrier items between your guests and your animals. So for example, if we wanted to, we could delete this barrier, and we could replace it with either the elephant grass or the common reeds, and the animals would not be able to escape, and the guests would be completely safe. Just to show that off, I'm going to move this real quick. right? And then when we click our African wild dog, go into habitat, and now we should have an escape form right there. Okay, so now let's place this instead. Let's have it recalculate, and there we go. We can use this plant as a barrier, and I believe that we can do so with the same, with the common reeds as well. Let's double check that. Come here, dog. There we go. And once again, same thing. So those two plants can actually be your barriers, which I think is really cool, in case you want to do something like that. However, I have to admit, I don't necessarily like these two plants. I think they're a little ugly. And as much as they're good at being barriers, I don't really want to double barrier this. I want some of this barrier to show through, and I want some of this building to show through. I just don't want it to be like the only thing you see when you turn left. Of course, one of the other things that we can do is we can use these cypress trees. So let's see how that would look. Let's build a little cypress hedge along here. Do we want to bring it onto the path? I mean, nothing stops us. Let's just see how it looks. There we go. So this sort of blocks it and it frames this space. And then of course we can infill with some shorter cypress trees, or we can adjust it, add some fluffy cypress, all kinds of things that we can do here. We can also use some of these date palms. I don't necessarily like that, but you know, we have options. So there's also these like African oil palms. Again, I think it's going to be too crowded for this space. But right now, admittedly, I think this is okay. It doesn't completely block this. Of course, another thing that we can do is, because these are going to be facing away from the animals, and as long as we get our barriers right, you know, we can also incorporate some vines. So let's go into here, let's reset, let's grab out some ivy. So there's multiple kinds of ivy. We have this vegetated ivy clump large, we have this ivy horizontal, ivy spread, ivy patches, all kinds of things. So let's go into here, let's click align to surface. So we can now select and start adding in some greenery to these areas. There we go. And I actually think that looks quite nice. Let's add a little bit more through here. And just in order to keep these from attaching to the group, when I go to place these down, I am holding Shift and it's removing that dialog box, and then I can click and it adds it. So, very nice if you want to add some decoration but you don't want to mess up a group. So there we go. I think that's already starting to look a lot better. Now let's go ahead and go into here and double check that it's not interfering with our animals. It's not affecting them at all. So that's good. Alright, now let's deal with these green spaces. So when you go to do your paths through here, you have two options. You can either use curbs on ground path, or you can opt not to use them at all. So let's get out our parquet, right? And we can choose to add in the game's automatically generated curbs for these paths. And they look alright. But, of course, if you want to get a little bit more creative with it, you can also add in your own curbs. And you can do this through a number of ways. One of the ways that I'm going to do is that I'm going to go in and grab some of our faux rocks. And we have these little ones down here. And these are free. These don't require you to have the aquatic pack. These just come with a base game. Let's pick this guy's probably good. Let's turn on random rotation. And I think the color's probably fine. And we can start to add in these little rocks through here and make kind of an edge this way. There we go. And then let's say that we wanted a little bit more green through here. Of course, we would probably want to get rid of faux. And let's go ahead and get our animals' requested foliage types out. So grassland and desert and Africa. I think that we can keep Africa, desert, and grassland, but we can also expand this because we're no longer working within this animal's specific requirements. So if we want a little bit more variety, I think that I would keep Africa because of the area that we're in, but we can also expand this to include temperate, and this sort of sits in the middle of these. So grassland, desert, and temperate. Temperate is sort of on the higher end of like water usage out of these. It gives us a little bit more variety. And then that way we can come through here and we can say, I want a sentry plant right here. Maybe I want another one like right here. And maybe we want some grass through here. So we're going to use this small deering grass. There we go. Just to tie it in with what's happening out there. So it's a small area and it's primarily used for our donation bin, but it's already looking much better. Speaking of, our donation bin has unique colors. In case you didn't know this, you can actually edit the colors on your donation bin. So I like what I've done here. I've done just orange and black, and I think it looks good, so we're going to stick with that. Next thing for our path extras. So we are definitely going to want some kind of seating through here. Of course, we can just come into bins, benches, and security. There's an entire section just for benches. And of course, you have all of the DLC and base game benches available at your disposal. So I often find that the Australian items work really well in African-themed zoos. I don't know why. They just mix really well. At least I think so. Previously, we had used an Arctic bench, but I'm not in love with it. So there are all these different options that we have available to us. Personally, even though we're using the African stuff, I'm not actually a huge fan of the African benches. Like, either of the base game ones or the North African one. I don't think that they really fit this area very well. So instead, I think we're just going to use the Australian benches. I'm going to put these on the outside of the path, and in the next tutorial we are going to be talking about guests, pathing, overcrowding, and we're going to be starting to broach that subject. So this is going to be one of the techniques that I'm going to talk about, is putting all of your guest path extras on the outside curb as often as possible. It just helps with guest flow and momentum. They're not constantly running into things because they do treat these as solid objects. Alright, so let's say that we don't want to continue with the stone all around this area. What would we do next? Personally, I would come into architecture, and I am a huge fan of using short little wood pieces to frame out my edging. So this might be a little bit incongruous, you know, using an ice block. But let's go into wood. Here we go. And we have these little 1 meter beams in the conservation section. And I really like these because they're flexi color. So I don't think that this color that we're using is particularly good. I would like it to be something darker. So let's go for like a, there we go, something like that. Mixes a little bit better with the benches that we have in here. And now we can use this to frame out this entire edge. Alrighty, so I have done the greater portion of this curve right through here. I haven't finished the entire thing. But I just wanted to do this so that way you can kind of see what a custom curb could look like for these paths. So just to contrast, let's go ahead and pull out that same path. Let's go ahead and turn back on our curb. Right? So here we have the brighter orange wood. Here we have the darker wood. So it can look really good to do custom curbs if you have the time and the patience and you're willing to do that sort of thing. Sometimes it pays off really well, other times it does not. So the last thing that I want to show you is something a little bit more advanced, but that can pay off really well. And I especially want to show it off with this space. I think that this is a good opportunity. So let's go ahead and remove all of this curbing that I just did. I know, a lot of effort just is gonna go down the drain. It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be fine. So the other thing that we can do is we can create false plazas. So essentially, your guests are only going to be able to go to the sections where a path allows. Like, your guests cannot leave this path or else they'll despawn. That's just part of the game. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're limited to this when you portray it to the world. So there are a number of construction pieces that are really good for this. First one is going to be plaster. And plaster is great for creating a false floor because you have so many panel sizes. It's relatively smooth, and you can pass it off for a lot of materials, or at least at the very least a lot of ground coverings. You know, at a certain point, it's always going to be plaster, but at least, you know, it's very flexible. The other one that is very good is, of course, concrete. Concrete is a very popular, very common flooring substance. You know, we used it in there already, so we can always come into here, and we can choose a concrete color that we like, that we think fits this area. For example, like a pale orange or something like that, and we can tile out our space, and then we can create false green areas. So like through here, we can create a false border, and then we can say that the pathing exists in an area where it doesn't, and we can allow this green space to have grass and stuff where it doesn't actually. This is really handy because this little area through here, if we do this line of green, guests are going to be able to pass through this space. And they don't treat objects as solid, or at the very least they don't treat construction pieces as solid. If it's in the facilities tab, yes. If it's in the construction tab, guests do not. That's a no. So I like this little thing that we've made right here, but it is going to have to move. So let's merge all of it into a group. Let's let's move it away, and we will replace it when we're done. Likewise, these objects are going to come back. They're just not going to come back in the same way. Now, we do want our pathing to function underneath this space. So how are we going to make that work? Well, what I like to do is get out something like a concrete floor, line it up with my area. Let's call it right here. Try and get it as square as we can. And let's line it up with this space right here. There we go. Now we don't want to sink this into the floor. What we're now going to do is we're going to go into path. We can select any old flooring. It doesn't matter because you're not going to see it. Let's get rid of curbs. We don't want them for this technique. There we go. Now this has been connected. From here, let's go ahead and fill out our space with concrete flooring. Escape. And we're going to drop this just to where it covers our path. Now, I like to do it this way because I don't like to see my NPCs having their feet glitch through the floor. I think that looks weird. So I try and get this as low as I can. Go ahead and select that. Call it good. So now let's go ahead and add in this green stretch right here. For that, I am going to go into here, and the conservation as well as the aquatic packs offer these sorts of panels. So the tropical pack has this already covered in all kinds of plants. The conservation one is just this green sheet, and it's got its own kind of wobble and texture and stuff like that to it. Of course, we could also choose to do this with mulch. Get rid of these, reset the filters, mulch. So we have all of these. This gives you a really nice variety. There's a good starting point. And now I'm going to frame out this little garden area that we're going to have. There we go. So we finished off this little green edge right here. Next, let's go ahead and move our acacia tree, which I do absolutely want to keep. I like that plant quite a lot. It also provides a lot of shade, as you can tell. Like, it's already so much brighter through here. And let's go ahead and figure out what we're going to do with this space, because remember, we've cut this off because even though our staff need to be able to get through here, we don't actually want this to be factored in. We're going to say that these are coming through two different sections and this way is inaccessible. So where else do we want a garden to be? There we go. So I think that I want another garden that's going to be like right through here. And at this point, we can go back into our concrete and let's go ahead and pull out our concrete wall panels. There we go. And we want these to just clip through. And now we can finish filling in this space. There we go. And we can extend it as far as we would like. There we go. And while it's not seamless, what it is doing at the very least is it's making everything mostly look like it lines up together. Which at the end of the day, I know that that's a very low bar, but that is kind of the bar that we are trying to hit with our pathing. There we go. And now we have this little custom plaza, and we know that it functions because of the fact that everything under here is pathed. So now let's go ahead and bring back in our little green space right here. Let's move our box. And let's move this whole thing up. And then like we showed with the little panels. So our panels are not going to quite do it. But what we can do is we can take these panels and we can frame off a little green area right here. And then we can use our same Indonesian brick technique. And if I can ever square it. In a space that is not square. There we go. There we go, filled this out a little bit. And now what we can do is come over here and I have these nice little statues that I've recolored a little bit. So this is the New World wolf sculpture. They are in fact flexi-color, so this is pretty cool. If you go into their color regions right here, so you have the bottom gradient, which like we could put green, and this top one, which we could put like, you know, red or something like that, which, you know, that looks terrible. I suppose if you want it as like a Christmas wolf. There we go. So we get these nice little statues, and they're not quite African wild dogs, but considering we don't have African wild dogs in the game, this is kind of what we're stuck working with. There we go, and now we have this nice little African wild dog planter. And we can move this donation box, say, right here. And then let's say that, you know, we wanted a trash can or something like that. Right there. Alrighty, so what if we don't like this concrete? Well, of course, because we have all the concrete grouped together, we can come into here, we can edit the color. I think that's just a little bit too orange. We can always drop it down to something like that. So it's a little bit more earth tony, it's not quite so bright, and it does make the oranges that we have pop. And it contrasts really nicely with the green, I think. So now we have our own custom little area where the guests can walk. And again, because there's a path here, it will function. Even though it won't function the way that, you know, it's displayed to look, your guests will navigate around it correctly. Of course, the last thing that we have to do is we have to make sure that the guests don't treat this as a place to walk through. So how are we going to do that? Because again, everything underneath here is squared up, so this is all one united space. So in order to make sure that the guests don't move through here, we're going to go into security. We have these little ribbons. We're going to line these up. We're going to move them into the space, just like that. And now our guests are going to treat this as if it were an actual real object. Let's go ahead and bring our tree back in. There we go. I like the way that it swoops in. A, it casts this in some really nice shade. And B, it's got this, like, forward. I don't know, I just like it. Like, as the builders, we're the only people who are going to notice these details, but it's nice to just have details you notice, you know? So, of course, the last thing that we can do is we can bring in some of the inspirations that we used over here and fill out this area as well. So for example, I have this nice little Jiren grass clump. I can just duplicate it, and I can bring it over. I think I want our grass to be a little bit shorter. There we go. And now I think I want some daisies and some more of these centennial plants. There we go. That's a nice little area, I think. And lastly, let's go ahead and get our little African wild dog cluster. There we go. And because this area is really meant to emphasize that you're sort of down here, almost inside the habitat, almost with the pack, I wanted to bring more of that out here with using these statues. So of course you've got the one that you can look at, you know, mostly so that way you can actually like get a really good look of what an African wild dog would look like if this were an actual statue. But then also bringing in more of that you're walking with the pack idea by bringing in these three little guys over here. So lastly, I think for this bottom area we do need to tackle our education. So I had previously made this little board, and it's cute. It's fine, and we will use it, but it's really nothing too complicated. What I've done here is I've used some bamboo pieces and I've slapped it together, just sort of framing everything out, putting in some fake posts, all that kind of stuff. Now, of course, when we talk about education, it is an entire subject that is worth its own tutorial. The main things that I want to mention right now is that for every habitat, I suggest that you have one of these boards for yourself. And considering our new layout, I kind of like the idea of throwing one right over here. But these boards are mostly just for you. So while they do contribute a little bit to your guests' overall education, they really don't do a lot in the grand scheme of things. You would need a ridiculous number of these boards to have any kind of effect. What's actually more useful are these educational speakers. So I'm going to set this one up right here. I'm going to turn it to African wild dogs, and I'm going to increase the radius so that now it covers basically this entire plaza. If we scoot it in a little bit, there we go. This entire region is now covered, and it's hidden by our little statue. There it is, right there. In case we ever need to edit it. We shouldn't, but, you know, just in case. So that is our lower area now done, and I think it looks a whole lot better from where we started. There we go. You can still see the building, but the cypress sort of breaks up your view. This area is nice and dark, it's shady, and it makes you feel lower than you actually are, which I rather enjoy. So next, let's deal with this upper area. So like we did with the curbs, you can do your own custom railing. There are multiple ways to do this, but the nice thing is that because we used 4-meter paths up here, and we used the snapping tool in order to make this sort of concentric platform, like we did down here with this little bamboo facade, we can go into architecture, walls, and we can use any of the curved pieces in order to frame this out. Now, of course, the problem that you're going to run into is what do you do through here? So when we go along these edges down here, let's go ahead and get out our Australia wood panel 1. There we go. If we use our align to surface, it's going to create this 2-meter angle for us, at which point then we can just go through and make the same alignment. But you'll notice that there's some graphical problems when we do this. The pathing is clipping out of this. It's all flushed together, so it looks really kind of weird and uniform. And so while this is a really nice material to use, and these two colors, I mean, they definitely complement each other in this scenario, you can't really get these on the outer edge, right? There's no adaptiveness to them. They have to stay on this inner line. So all of this looks relatively flush. If we don't want to do that, what we can do instead is we can go back into our pathing. We can click railing on elevated. And while it's not precise, it is a quick, easy way to just get the job done. It also saves you potentially an hour of fiddling around with curves. I think I'm just gonna stick with this, partially because I don't want to do a custom edge, and partially because I think this looks okay, you know? It's not amazing, but it looks okay. What we do want to do is handle this. So again, we can go back into here. We can get our bamboo curved wall. And if we don't know what color we used anymore, for example, I have opened and closed this program multiple times since I did this wall piece right here. We can duplicate, move it out over here, and then grab our bamboo wall curved. Why are you making a mockery of me? There we go. And you may have to do it a couple of times, but it will auto track this color and it will reapply it. And now we can get rid of the extras. There we go. And then lastly, let's go into here, grab our little education box, duplicate, move it up here. And we will need to reduce the radius on this speaker. There we go. It doesn't cover the entire path, but it won't overlap with this one. Lastly, let's go into our facilities. Yeah, we'll just do the one bench down there. One right there, one right there. Let's go ahead and replace this with our new color scheme. There we go. And again, if we wanted to, there we go. So now these two gaps are also covered by education. Alrighty, so next up on the list, we gotta deal with this building right here. So we have already been going on for quite a long time, and I want to keep this kind of short because, well, I think that it'll be slightly interesting to see what I do with this building. Watching me actually do it might not be. So we may end up doing like a speed build, we may end up cutting large chunks out, just a fair warning, but I do want to go ahead and get this building updated a little bit more, and then I will come back after that. Okay, and we are back. So only some minor changes to the building. You know, we added some corners, changed the color of the stone a little bit. It's a little bit more muted now. It's less like bright pink. And I mainly did that because I wanted this building to be like so bland that you naturally want to look towards something else. And I think I achieved that. It's a little bit office parky, and I think that works to its benefit, if I'm completely honest. So yeah, it's as done as I think that we are going to get this without, like, building an entire zoo, which we already do that enough here. So anyway, I hope that this habitat tutorial series has been useful for you. Of course, there are tons of things that we have not covered. You know, there's what do you want to do if you want to build an entire habitat inside a building? You know, there's different levels, there's inviting your guests into the habitat, there's all kinds of stuff that we can continue to do. But of course, with this series, I really just wanted to illustrate how we can go from just a regular old box and turn it into something magnificent, you know. So I hope that this has been helpful. If there's anything else that you would like to see me do, if you have any, like, requests for tutorials or things that you would like clarification on, please, you know, leave me a comment. I do read those, and I will, you know, be happy to double check and see if I can maybe whip something up. So, thank you for joining us for this series. Next time we will be doing pathing and guests and all that kind of good stuff, so stick around for that. And happy building!